Monster Hunter is a franchise perpetually panned by critics. While that might not appear true now, as each subsequent entry in the franchise trends up on review aggregate sites, the moment you start digging deeper and looking at written reviews in games journalism communities, you inevitably come across scores of reviews that undermine this positive trend. Now, I'm not begrudging games journalists for being short-sighted fools who cannot grasp the grandeur of one of my favorite franchises. A lot of criticisms they bring up are true. The two big criticisms of the original Monster Hunter have chased the Monster Hunter games through their entire existence. These criticisms are as follows: Monster Hunter's controls are a clunky mess, and the camera is garbage. I will not be refuting these criticisms. They are, for the most part, true, and to deny them is to deny something that prospective players may feel very strongly about. I will, however, defend these elements. For me, the clunkiness of the controls are a central part of the game's charm. Monster Hunter is what someone might call an outdated game. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The stiffness of the controls are an aspect of the game that the game stands to lose something by throwing aside, being that they contribute a great bit to the feeling of weight in the game. The second criticism, the camera, absolutely pollutes some of the game's potential. They need tightening up, and over the course of the game's history they have attempted steps to do so. Excluding the Wii U game, Monster Hunter World is going to be the first home console version of the game in almost a decade. In that time, to combat the camera becoming arguably worse in the portable games, they created a lock-on system that simply centered the camera on target monster whenever the center camera button was used. Another reason the camera is an inherent issue in Monster Hunter is that many monsters' massive size will unavoidably inhabit large portions of the screen at any given time, making camera management an issue up close and risking losing sight of certain elements in the game. We'll get back to the clunkiness, but for now let's consider how those making a living as game journalists and reviewers review games. Game reviewers work on a schedule that may or may not be considerably tight. As such, they usually aren't looking to do or can't do everything in a game, or even do much side content. New games scoring high for them then may just be up to a game having systems without any glaring holes and that provide a lot of new and/or impressive things on a moment-to-moment basis. So let's apply this to games from another franchise. In part of his video, Breath of the Wild's Disneyland problem, Jeff Thu of Mother's Basement discusses the Zelda cycle as it relates to Skyward Sword and Twilight Princess. What follows is a reiteration on some of his points. Both of these games did worse with hobbyist players than with those in official critical circles, and while neither are rated considerably horrible when combined, those giving it mixed and unfavorable reviews account for more than just a couple outliers. See, both these games offer engagement, giving players new things to play with on a semi-regular basis with temples and the like. Navigating these dungeons will often see the player get some tool to pass a dungeon that would otherwise be impossible. Giving players these tools in a controlled environment built for them is cool and fun and makes the player think about their implementation. However, after that there aren't many places designed specifically with that in mind, and these toys become worthless knickknacks, pieces of a puzzle foreign to the main world of the game. Players who spend a long time in the game world, players who want to explore every nook and cranny of it, and players who want to experiment with everything will find that a lot of what they got was only useful when they got it. These design choices can easily cause these kinds of players to have worse impressions of the games than reviewers who want something new and exciting but maybe not useful in most circumstances. Back to Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter really doesn't have any of these things. It doesn't even really have anything for the experimenting player. Monster Hunter's world is just a couple mission hubs and disconnected instances of maybe 5 zones. Monster Hunter is a game about systems mastery. Everything it has it gives you in 2 hours. Maybe some fools waste your time with mushrooms or fish, and then you're straight to big monsters, and you stay on big monsters. Forever. Monster Hunter is a game that's easy to not get into and stop quick. But if you stay and you're not down with the mechanics 10 hours in, and if you're not madly in love with it in 20, it's an awful drain of a game. And that's why Monster Hunter gets critically panned, and why so little people get into it, but those that do never leave it. Monster Hunter as a game is like... I'ma say it. It's like Dark Souls. Or, well, Dark Souls is like Monster Hunter. No, not like that. Yeah, like that. Dark Souls is a game about systems mastery. The game throws you out on your own real quick, and your success or failure rests on internalizing the game's core systems and learning enemy attack patterns. It's about finding a weapon you like and rolling with it. Like Monster Hunter, Dark Souls controls can be described as clunky. You gotta buy your attacks a wedding ring, and you gotta plot out of the way with your rolls. Once you learn these systems, the vast majority of the game suddenly opens up to you and becomes drastically more manageable. And once these systems are ingrained in you, they stay with you. Firing up Dark Souls after a while is just a matter of polishing everything up in a bit. It's like riding a bike. It might take you a bit to get up to speed, but you just kinda know how to do it. You gotta cut the thing's tails off. Also, the camera's kinda garbage. Monster Hunter is just like that. Of course, Monster Hunter is missing a lot of what would otherwise pull the Dark Souls crowd in. Those same people who want to explore the world and play with everything in the game world who may feel disappointment in the aforementioned Zelda games but become enamored with Dark Souls world and play space have no equivalent in Monster Hunter, a game with no persistent world. Dark Souls has a great core narrative, if not somewhat shrouded, in many interesting interweaving sub-narratives throughout. Monster Hunter's core narrative is interesting enough and provides very specific world building, but isn't very engaging, with little actual reason to hunt anything you take contracts for as framed by the game's central narrative. You're a hunter. Of course you hunt. Also, on the note of Dark Souls, there's been some changes to things. An analysis of the game's central gameplay loop necessitates comparisons to MMORPGs. Monster Hunter's core gameplay loop is nothing more than that of an MMO's, having been stripped of all its narrative and aesthetic conceits. You kill stuff, to make stuff, to kill bigger stuff, to make more stuff. It's a game so plainly built on exploiting people's reward systems. On that point alone, the game's difficulty gating most prospective players off explains why anyone into it isn't for it for life. At the end of the day, the reason Monster Hunter reviews so poorly is that any small dissatisfaction with the game's systems are magnified by the game's unapologetic focus on them. There's never anything to distract or take focus away from the arbitrary goals of the game. It reviews so poorly because anyone who puts in a goal of, I'll play or I have to play through the story, the 40-hour mark, the 80-hour mark, etc., will always be disappointed. Monster Hunter is simply a game that has no ending. Monster Hunter can't be completed. Monster Hunter is simply a question of how long you want to keep playing it. And once the answer is not any more, then the player has finally finished the game. Playing past that is such a plain waste of the player's time that anyone who does so, whether it be someone 2 hours in, someone who just finished the story, someone 80 hours in, or someone 800 hours in, is suddenly playing the worst game out there that isn't functionally broken. Hey guys, a bit of a postscript here that I really couldn't fit into the central script of the video, but is another trend that has arisen in the games journalism circles in the last few years that also helps with things getting higher scores, is that games journalists, for a lot of reasons, have and are moving away from the scoring system, mostly due to some unsavory business practices in the industry. And those are just kind of causing a lot of games to trend up in general, which in a lot of ways means that games journalism as a whole is changing and aggregate scores aren't as valuable, even though a lot of people would argue that they never really were valuable. The old adage that anything below a 9 is kind of considered garbage, just because of how people review. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate your support. If you like this video, consider heading over to my Patreon, where you can support me in making these more formal types of videos. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.